How do you control the mind so that the mind does not control you? It's a big question. It's an important question. It's probably one of the biggest questions when you're trying to break cycles, you're trying to make change, or you're trying to do something different. The real question is, how do you keep that gremlin, keep that inner critic, right, under control so that you can make the leap, so that you can make the change, so you can break the cycle? That's what I'm going to talk about today. My name is Crystal Hoban. I am an identity coach, and I help people build the self trust and confidence that they need so that they can stop abandoning themselves and learn to live in their truth. Now, when I think about how to control that inner critic and how to kind of not let it control you, right? I think a lot of us think, well, if we can control it, then we can change it, right? And the reality is that if you're doing what it's doing to you back to it, you're getting stuck in a cycle, right? So the more that you're trying to control it, the more it's going to get louder. And that's one thing that I learned a really long time ago is like anything that you resist persists, right? And whatever you're focused on is only going to become bigger. So if you're trying to control certain things, that is going to kind of cause a bigger issue for you. You're not going to be able to be honest, when it comes to that. It's not about trying to control it. It's not about trying to minimize it. It's not about trying to make it do something different, right? Because when you're doing that, right, you're overly focused on this thing. And what actually becomes more important, and this is the true aspect of that concept surrender that they talk a lot about, is that you're not trying to control it and you're not trying to make it do something different. You're letting it. Kind of like, I think your name is Mel, whatever, the let them theory, right? Let it. Let it say whatever it needs to say. Let it do whatever it needs to do. There's nothing that you need to do with it. And I think that that's where people get stuck is this doubt is coming in or this fear is coming in, right? And instead of just letting it happen and letting it pass and just noticing it, you feel a need to fix it. You feel a need to do something about it. You feel a need to make sure that it doesn't happen. And that's actually choosing to engage with it, right? And what you focus on is going to continue to be what you experience, right? So, without realizing, most people are choosing to engage with it by fixing it, by making it better, right? By trying to stop it and control it, which is actually keeping it alive. This is not about you choosing to engage with it. This is about you choosing to see it for what it is. And as soon as you choose to engage in it, you're choosing to go back into that cycle and back into that loop. So, let's, for example, give an idea of, okay, I am starting something new. Okay. And let's talk about my therapy practice. So, years ago, when I started my therapy practice, I had left my job randomly and I had just decided that I was done with it and I would figure it out. Okay. And in 2 weeks, I had my business up and running, bank account, all of those things set up and running. And it was because I was overdoing, right? Like I was in this place of like, this has to work. This is the only option. That's it, right? And there was this fear that it might not work out. And I fed that fear, right? I fed that fear by saying, no, this absolutely is going to work out. This is the only thing that can absolutely work out. This is the only way it can work, right? And so I overproduced and I overdid things to try to take care of that fear. I tried to manage that fear by proving it wrong. And I'm sure a lot of you probably can connect to that, where you probably try to manage a fear by proving it wrong. And, you know, by doing that, right, I created this business and this way of building my business around having to overproduce and having to constantly be searching and seeking things out instead of setting systems up. Okay. I learned that years ago. That was a tough lesson. And also it kept me in this overproducing place and it kept me in this constant fear place, right? Like I just recreated that cycle of fear because instead of letting myself recognize what it was and not engage with it, I tried to push past that to take care of it and make it go away. And I actually ended up creating a whole business around that instead of being regulated and calm enough to be able to recognize that actually, if I was regulated and calm enough, I could have set systems up so I wouldn't have to be like that or function like that, right? And constantly have to be seeking out clients. But I didn't set that up the right way in the beginning because I let that fear control what I did and what I didn't do. I let that fear determine what my next steps were. And so, and then eventually I figured out how to like set the systems up and stuff like that. But regardless, my point of sharing this is that if you choose to engage that fear and prove it wrong, right? Then you're choosing to stay in that cycle and you're choosing to stay stuck in there. And so this isn't about you trying to prove that fear wrong. This is about you learning how to hear that fear and see that fear for what it is and choose to regulate yourself through it so that you can move forward differently, right? If we engage in that fear, we focus on that fear, then we're just going to create a future around that fear or a present around that fear, which actually makes it true, anyways, right? So, like, I'm thinking of like another example, which would be something along the lines of like setting a boundary. Okay. So, let's say you set a boundary in a relationship and you have this fear that the boundary is not going to be respected. So you take the chance and you set the fear and you set the boundary anyways, with this fear informing it that it's not going to be respected. So instead of regulating yourself through it, what you probably ended up doing, which I am totally responsible for this from years ago, is I started over explaining myself and over explaining my boundary and why it was okay, and shaping and shifting my boundary or moving my boundary instead of holding strong on it, right? And so I engaged in the fear. I engaged in the fear, and the fear ended up playing out and being what I experienced. Because instead of me letting the fear be there, regulating myself through that fear, and then taking the step forward, I tried to fix the fear, right? And it only created that fear to come true. I'm sure this is probably true in everything that you can think of associated with this, because when you are trying to fix a fear, when you are trying to make it better, okay, when you are engaging it, you are bringing it into fruition in life. So it's not about fixing the fear, it's about surrendering to the fear and seeing it for what it is. It doesn't have to define your experience, nor does it have to define what you do or don't do, nor does it have to define your next movement. And this is where surrender kind of comes in, that you hear a lot in the spiritual world. And so I think it's really important to recognize that anytime you're functioning from that place, that fear is most likely going to happen because you're kind of moving from it, right? You're trying to control it. Where what's actually needed is you to regulate yourself, calm your nervous system down, calm yourself down, and put yourself into a place where you can see it for what it truly is. So I think that like the hard part around this is that when you're listening to this fear or you're in this fear-based thought pattern, a lot of the time that's information that you're dysregulated. And what's actually needed is for you to regulate yourself so you can turn all parts of your brain on. So when you're dysregulated and your nervous system is amped up, all parts of your brain are not active. Okay. So what I mean by that is the amygdala which is our fear center, which is usually where these fear-based thoughts come from, the inner critic, like all those different things, this is the only part that's active in your brain. Your prefrontal cortex, which does planning, is turned off. Your hippocampus, which keeps memory, is turned off. All the other parts of your brain are not active and on, just the amygdala. And they also refer to this as the reptilian brain because this is the part of your brain that is fight, flight, freeze. This is your survival part of your brain, right? So if you're functioning out of fears or you're experiencing fears, it's probably information that this guy is firing and he's the only thing firing up in there. And that's information that you need to take a step back and you need to regulate yourself and calm yourself down so that you can actually turn on all parts of your brain so that you can make better decisions, so that you can not listen and let this control you, but instead see it from outside of the box, right? See the bigger picture and you can make a choice. Whenever the amygdala is the only thing that's active, you're not making choices in that space. You're reacting. Everything is a reaction. And so it's really important to recognize that if all parts of your brain are not on, you are being controlled by your past. You're being controlled by your trauma. You're being controlled by your experiences of what happened, not what actually is happening right now. And that's why nervous system regulation is so important. Because when you can regulate your nervous system, you can be present in the here and right now and make decisions with the here and right now, not based off of the hurts and the pains that you've had of the past or the traumas that you've had of the past. And so regulating the nervous system is actually what needs to happen before you make a choice and you move forward and before you do anything. So trying to get the mind under control, or if the mind is going to control you, depends on what you do before you take action, right? It depends on what you choose to do before you decide to react, right, from that survival space, or you choose to regulate and respond from a present moment experience of now. It's your choice. And there's so many different ways to regulate your system, and that's something I'll have to get into in a different video. But I want you to understand that we let things control us if we're not slowing down and regulating ourselves to make a different choice, to take a different option. So, will your mind control you, or will you choose to gain control of your mind? Regain, right? Think about it. Will you choose to regain control of your mind? Determines on what you do within that space of that fear and then the response or the reaction, right? And I think it's about really recognizing when you're in that space. So, like, I would want you to think about kind of like, how do you know you're in that dysregulated space? Some of the signs for me would be like my stomach hurts. Usually I start to have tummy pains, and that's information that I'm like dysregulated. Or I start to feel really amped up and like I have like energizer bunny energy, and that'd be information that I'm dysregulated. Or my thoughts are going so fucking fast that I can't follow them and I can't stop them. That's dysregulated energy, right? And so part of the coaching that I do is I help people to regulate that so that they cannot continue functioning from their past experiences, because you're not breaking any cycles or making any changes if you keep listening to the past of what you've experienced and you're letting that inform your decisions of now, right? The only way that you're going to be able to move forward and change and break the cycles is that you're going to learn how to be right now, here and now, and not let the past inform your choices so that you can do something different. So this is exactly what I do in my coaching. I teach people how to regulate themselves through that so that they can build the self-trust within themselves. Also understand what's actually happening, right? This is not about you being broken. This isn't about something being wrong with you. This isn't about you being a failure, right? And as soon as we engage in those ways, even, right, that is us choosing to engage in that fear. And then we end up down a shame spiral and we're exhausted afterwards. I'm sure you know that feeling real well. where as soon as you attach to it and then you make meaning of it about who you are and your worth, you're exhausted. You're beat to a crisp, literally burned to a crisp. You're exhausted afterwards because you just took all your energy trying to make sense of what was happening and you ended up falling down the rabbit hole exhausted, right? And so this is what I teach people how to do, is how to do that different. How to remove that meaning that we have attached to those things so that we can actually regulate and be in the present moment and choose to move forward. So, if this is something that resonates with you and you're ready to build the self trust and the confidence that you need to take your next steps forward and live in your truth and stop abandoning yourself, then my coaching is for you. You can go to crystalclearmystic.com and you can put in an application. And if we're aligned, I would love to work with you and help you. It's your choice. Are you ready to level up?